Welcome to Forgotten History of Women podcast. In every episode, we discuss the struggles faced by women in specific contexts. Join us in this bittersweet journey as we shed another spotlight on our remarkable history. Hi everyone, today's topic is women and football. When I was a little girl, I loved playing football, but I was told many times that football is not a game for girls. Especially my mother was concerned that playing football would affect my physiological development in a bad way. But I was good, like really good. Yet I couldn't find any encouragement to move forward, and at one point I just grew up and stopped playing football. As a grown woman, I stopped believing capitalistic football a long time ago, but I like to kick some balls from time to time. Despite my interest in this game, I recently realized that I knew nothing about the history of women's football. As I started researching, I sadly discovered that the female football is actually a perfect example of how our natural rights can quickly be taken away from us. That's why today I will take you on a football journey from Victorian era to the Middle East. So if your crampons and your leggings are ready, let's get started. The history of football can be traced all the way back to ancient China. Throughout the history, many other countries and cultures have had their own version of football, but the game, as we know it today, emerged in 19th century in Britain. During that time, football was very popular in there, but also limited to the local neighborhoods. Factory, community, and school team existed, but everybody made up their own rules, so many games ended in dispute. A group of Cambridge students who were concerned about this situation came together in 1848 to standardize the football. They created a set of rules called Cambridge Rules, and it was a significant step towards the establishment of football leagues. So the rules were widely adopted and paved the way for the future of football, including women's football. So when did the ladies started to occupy the football fields? In 1881, the first known female football match was organized by a group of women called themselves England and Scotland. The match attracted considerable public attention, and a week later, their second game was played in front of an audience of 5,000 people. They couldn't finish the game because some men invaded the field in the middle of the game and attacked the football players. 13 years later, in 1894, an aristocrat and a feminist pioneer of the time, Lady Florence Dixie, rebelled against the idea that women cannot play football. Her determination led to the founding of first known women's football club, the British Ladies. Dixie advertised in a newspaper to establish a team. About 30 women responded to Dixie's advertisement, which is how the team was formed, actually. BLFAC founded with a newspaper advertisement, split it into two in 1895 and played its first match as South and North. This game attracted an audience of approximately 10,000 people. At the time, the media targeted the British ladies. Newspapers started to criticize the female players' clothes. They also complained about the lack of pleasure in women's game and how football is harmful for women's body. Many newspapers and magazines published mocking cartoons about women playing football. One of the reasons why BLFAC attracted so many spectators and so much media coverage at the time was, wait for it, the famous writer Oscar Wilde. Rumor has it, his affair with Dixie's nephew, Lord Alfred Douglas, drew media attention to this noble family, and the opening of a female football club in this turmoil created a forest fire. In this period, it is possible to summarize the reasons for the discomfort in society about women playing football in a few points. First one is a myth that the football was harmful to development and health of female body, supported by fake doctors' reports. The second one is women earning money by playing football was quite off-putting for the men at the time. The third one is the clothes of women on the pitch were not suitable for the spirit of Victorian era. And the last one, I think the most important one, the fanatical attitude that the football is a masculine sport of British men. Despite these attacks by the media and pressure from the society, BLFAC took to the pitch under the sponsorship of Lady Dixie and played over 100 games in 2 years. Unfortunately, due to the lack of acceptance and support from the community, the club's money eventually ran out and the first female football club soon came to an end. And the First World War emerges onto the stage. Attempts to improve women's football were made in 20 years between the BLFAC and World War I, but no significant progress was made. By 1915, most men had gone off to the fight at front and women had taken their places in the cities. As some of you may guess, the male population decreased to such an extent that Football Association decided to suspend the games and league itself. We're gonna mention the world wars in this podcast a lot, but the First World War had a unique role for female football. Here is the story. Imagine being born and raised in rural England around 100 years ago. As a woman, you can leave your home only to go to your husband's house. From childhood, you would be taught to cook, take care of your husband and children, and obey without question. As the men went off to the fight, these women were employed in ammunition factories in big cities. They had to do the jobs they would never have been allowed to do otherwise, and they were even get paid for it. As they worked together in the factories, the women discovered football. They watched the men's game and started playing during their lunch breaks. They found out they were good at it, and they liked it. As a result, women's football became more and more popular during the war years. The women played for charity games, collecting money for the soldiers' welfare. In the end, the war was a turning point for female football in Britain. In the early 1920s, interest in women's football increased undeniably. The Care Ladies was one of the most famous teams at the time. They play across England, and their game attracted crowds of 53,000 people in Liverpool, 67,000 people in London. They even played charity games against the French team in front of an audience of 25,000 people. The star player of the team was a lesbian woman called Lily Parr. She was the most famous football player in Britain at that time. Lily Parr made a history by scoring 986 goals in 32 years. Of course, this is not a scientific comparison, but I would like to do it anyway. Messi is one of the top scorers football player, and he has scored around 800 goals so far. He still hasn't reached the Lily Parr's goal tally. Despite her undeniable success, Lily Parr's achievements were not fully appreciated in her time, as you can imagine. It was only in 2019 she was rightfully honored as the first female player to have her statue in the Hall of Fame of National Football Museum. And here comes the dark times. After the war, men returned home and initiated their league immediately. As you can imagine, this brought a hypocritical attitude towards women's football. The games, supporting during the war year and encouraged for fundraising, continued to be popular even after the men's league started again. The fact that the interest in women's football was equal or even, dare to say, more significant than men's football caused controversy in Football Association. Primary source of discontent was the large revenue women's club raised by selling tickets. The Football Association even characterized this as a stealing money from men's pocket, but they couldn't impose a strict ban right away. This was partially because of the popularity of women's team and partially because the games were charity games. Nevertheless, Football Association did not let it go, and they put the women's team under financial scrutiny. As a result of these investigations, they found out the teams were paying salaries to their football players. Wow. Look, this part is hilarious. They said that these teams did not use all of their incomes for charity after all. By using this ridiculous excuse in 1921, the Football Association banned clubs in Britain from allowing women to use their pitches and facilities. They even tried to justify this ban with the fake doctor supports based on women's health. So, the development of women's football in Britain was plunged into 50-year-long darkness by the federation itself. With no fields to play on, no legal grounds, no training opportunities, women started to leave the pitches. Imagine a group of men sitting in a room decided women playing football is wildly inappropriate and these women should act in certain ways. It's like a scene from a dystopian movie. I hate to admit it, but not so much has changed so far. I wondered if there were other bans like this in the world, and the picture I came across was quite frustrating. Belgium, 1920 to 1970, 50 years. Brazil, 1958-1979. France, 1919 to 1970. Germany, 1955 to 1970, 15 years. Nigeria, 1950 to 1960, 10 years. Soviet Union, 1972 to 1990, 18 years. Spain, 1939 to 1970, 31 years. These are the years that these countries are banned women for playing football physically.
What a fox!
If you realize that, around the 1970s, the bans started to be lifted one by one. So what happened? Actually, I couldn't find the direct information about why the local federations had suddenly changed their minds, but it was possible to draw a conclusion by looking at some events that happened in those years. One of the major things was foundation of Independent European Women's Football Federation. This federation was founded by women who wanted to play football despite the local restrictions. They organized two World Cup events in 1970 and in 1971, which served as a platform for female football to gain recognition. The second World Cup, held in Mexico, was a particularly pivotal moment as it began to draw the attention of UEFA and FIFA to the women's football. Right after that, UEFA and FIFA asked from local federations to lift their bans. Of course, seeing their attitude as a progressive at the time would be a mistake, because they just realized they cannot prevent women from playing football, and the federations took these steps to at least prevent women playing it independently from them. They were not up to covering the damage they had done or developing women's league. Still, this gave a recognition to the female players and clubs at the federation level. Now, look at where we are jumping from 1971. Let's look at the dates when countries established their professional women's league. Sweden, 1988. Japan, 1993. Germany, 2004. Norway, 2007. England and France, 2011. Australia and USA, 2012. China, 2014. Spain, 2019. It has been precisely 40 years in England since the ban was lifted and the league established. It took 90 years for women to play on the fields again. Even this simple statistic can show us why women's football falls back in the industry. Now, let's move on to Middle East and look at Iran. Since the Iranian Revolution, women have been banned from attending the men's sporting events. In 2018, a couple of activist women sneaked into Azadi Stadium to watch the game, wearing a fake wigs and beards. They were later detained by the regime, but their protest attracted worldwide attention. In 2019, Sahar Godayari, known as Blue Girl, was arrested for entering a stadium to watch a game. Before her sentence was upheld, she poured gasoline and set herself on fire outside of the courthouse as a protest. Suffering from her severe burns, she was sentenced to 6 months in prison. We lost her soon after in the hospital. This happened only 4 years ago. This happened almost yesterday. Just a few months later, the Iranian government couldn't resist the pressure coming from the public and FIFA, and they lifted the 40 years ban to allow women to enter the stadium for an Iranian World Cup qualifying games. Unfortunately, this freedom was only for show, and the government continued to enforce the ban in various versions in the following years. It is still hard to talk about women's freedom to watch football in Iran. Let's jump to Saudi Arabia. In 2018, the ban on women's watching football in stadium was lifted in Saudi Arabia. In 2020, the first national female football team was formed. I had to admit that two things surprised me in here. First, I thought that all women of the national team were forced to wear a hijab, which is not valid. Apparently, Saudi Arabia's recent steps toward the liberalization have positive impact on women. At least in the big cities, they feel more free to wear their hair down. The second thing that I was surprised is the recent election of Lamia Baha. She was formerly in charge of the women's football in Arab Federation, and recently she was selected as a vice president of the federation itself. It is still tough to see a woman in such senior positions in football industry, even in Europe and USA. So, congratulations to her. I'm also posting the FIFA documentary about Saudi women's national team on the blog, so those who are interested can watch it for free. Finally, let's go to Afghanistan and look at Nadia Nadim's inspiring story. Nadia Nadim is one of the most famous names in the female football today. Her story is quite impressive. Nadia was born in Afghanistan and moved to Denmark with her family after her father was killed by Taliban. Starting her professional football career there, Nadia soon played for many European teams. In addition to the Danish national team, she played for Paris Saint-Germain as a team captain. As her career came to an end, Nadia made an interesting move and started studying medicine. She graduated as a doctor in 2020. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kick by a Donkey section of today's episode. Please welcome the president of Spanish Football Association, Luis Rubiales. In 2023, Spain won the Women's World Cup for the first time in their history, but joy was overshadowed by the incident during the trophy ceremony. The president of Federation, Luis Rubiales, lost himself and kissed the Spanish team captain Jennifer Hermoso on the lips during the ceremony. The Federation tried to cover up the incident by saying, "Don't make it a big deal, they were overjoyed, it was mutual, blah blah blah." But when Hermosa came out with all of her courage and said she absolutely did not consent to this contact, the Federation had to suspend him for 90 days. The first reaction of the former president against this pressure of his resignation was like, "I don't care, I will not resign, I'm here," something like this. And just as the Federation was planning to cover up the president and hope the protest went away, the women's team decided to go on a strike with full power. They stood like a rock in front of the Federation, demanding an improvement in their wages and the dismissal of Luis Rubiales. Yay! The poor president then reluctantly resigned and said he's not sorry at all. So bye-bye Rubiales. That's it from today's episode and thank you for listening. See you soon, Viragos. Jin Jian Azadi.